So yeah. We hope the first of many, but definitely the first either way. So we're happy to have you here and hope that you'll come back and bring a friend when you do. A couple of quick notes of thanks. So first of all, thank you to our team members that have worked really hard to put this on, to line up our guests, to get all the technical details in place. We really appreciate it. Janelle Sims and Curtis Wilcox managing a lot of our AV, Eric Manser and Jamie Spear wrangling all of the little loose ends. We really appreciate it, and thank you for all you have done to get all of us, me included, where we need to be when we need to be there to put on a great event. We will have a few speakers today to talk about many things that are happening, as the event indicates, related to digital accessibility at Harvard on today, Global Accessibility Awareness Day, at Harvard and around the world. So we're just thrilled. Our first speaker that I have the pleasure of introducing comes to us from Harvard. She's Dr. Alexis Stokes. She is our Associate Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer from the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging, where she served for several years. Prior to that role, she served as the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at the Paulson School of Engineering and Applied Sciences at Harvard. So she's got a long track record of doing great work here at Harvard. She has her hands in so many different things. She works on our Administrative Innovation Group. She's on the executive committee of the Women in Technology Plus Allies group here at Harvard. So knows her way around technology and the technology communities at Harvard. She has an extensive academic background in what we do. She has her doctorate in education, leadership, and policy from Vanderbilt University. And she's done great work, winning awards for her dissertation, doing outstanding work. She's a champion of minoritized communities and a champion of historically Black colleges and universities. A lot of great work in education in the nonprofit sector for a long time, and we're grateful to have her here today. At Harvard, she certainly plays some of our leadership and governance roles related to accessibility generally and digital accessibility specifically. So please help give a warm Harvard welcome to Dr. Alexis Stokes.
Thank you, and good afternoon. And thank you for inviting me. It is really an honor to be here. I will apologize in advance that I'm not able to stay for the entire event. We have our final meeting following this for our affinity celebrations that will launch next week. And I'll touch on that a little bit in some of my remarks. So I join you from ODIB, and it is just really an honor to not just serve in this role, but as was mentioned, to also be a member of the University Accessibility Committee, as well as co-staffing the Student Accessibility Advisory Group with Kate Higgins from UDR. So these are just two examples of how ODIB partners with university leaders, but also key offices on campus to drive equity and access forward, and specifically to drive accessibility forward, and to make it very clear that disability is diversity. And it absolutely is a part of our priority areas. We work very closely with UDR. We're extremely grateful for the partnership there. It is through our partnership with UDR, as well as the Student Accessibility Advisory Group, that Kate and I are working closely with students around looking at our orientation materials across campus. So as we know, within our very decentralized structure, it is not often we have the opportunity to make change and impact within each school. And so to be looking at our orientation materials to not only increase awareness of the resources that exist, but remove barriers to accessing those resources for our students. But also for us to identify where are the gaps in those resources and how can we work together through the University Accessibility Committee to address those gaps and fill those gaps. We also have worked together to launch the inaugural Affinity Celebration honoring graduates with disabilities that will take place on Monday at 9 a.m. at the Harvard Business School. It will be live streamed, so I invite each of you to tune in and join us for this joyous occasion in celebrating these amazing students that have accomplished so many things over their time here at Harvard, and that we know will go on to do amazing things within our society and take up this charge of advancing accessibility, and specifically advancing digital accessibility. So I couldn't be here and not mention our updated digital accessibility policy. I am thrilled that this is an example of how we can come together and drive accessibility forward. It is everyone's responsibility. And one of ODIB's priorities is, how do we embed equity and access principles in our structures, in our frameworks, and in our policies? And this digital accessibility policy is an example of how we do that. And so the partnerships and collaborations, the leadership that was at place for that policy to move forward is something that we can hold up and say, we can do this in many areas of our institution. We can embed these principles to make sure that we are an accessible campus where everyone can thrive. And we also value every voice to be a part of that process and at the table. So I thank you again for allowing me to be here to celebrate this day with you all, as well as to work with you beyond today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis, for those great remarks. We're so happy to partner with you and your whole team in the Office of Equity, Diversity, Inclusion, Belonging. Great efforts. One of the things that we talk about every time we present about digital access at Harvard is that is one of the ways, the many, many ways that those who work on technology can directly impact the way Harvard is inclusive and welcoming to those with disabilities. Maybe working on that document or that website might not be what you think of as an equity mindset, but it absolutely can be. In Alexis's remarks, she mentioned our new digital accessibility policy. And if you've heard from me lately, you know I am obligated at least every 15 minutes to talk about the policy. So I'm going to do so very briefly to make sure you're aware of it and all of the awesome resources that are available to you as members of the Harvard community and even beyond to help support you in helping create more inclusive digital content. So as you may have heard, the announcement went out to our community last month. It was on April 11th that it was a message from our provost, our executive vice president, and our university chief information officer telling us that we are expanding and increasing the policy related to accessibility. And the policy just says that we want all of the electronic content at Harvard to follow web content accessibility guideline principles. We want all of our stuff at Harvard to be accessible so that everyone at Harvard and around the world can contribute to our teaching and research mission, which is a great stance to take. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort to live up to that, but it's great that our policy reflects those values that everybody we talk to says that's what we want to do. A few things. Our team has lots of supports available to you to help make digital content accessible. Shameless plug if you have not already visited it, but I hope and I'm sure you have, it's probably your homepage bookmarked, but accessibility.hewitt, that's H-U-I-T, .harvard.edu is our team's webpage. And the team does a great job of constantly updating content, resources, guides. I know we have a few guests from outside the university today, and I'll say 99% of what we publish is free and available to anyone to look at and to reference. So you are welcome to do so, and we appreciate you for doing so. For our team, we have tons of tips and tricks from our commonly used applications and platforms on campus to the nitty-gritty that you might be working on to how to comply with our policy or do's and don'ts, tips and tricks, best practices for hosting meetings. We have lists of our tools and resources. So our tools that crawl our website and can crawl your website at Harvard and help provide automated reports on accessibility. And when you're ready for a deeper dive, tools that you can use to help assess the accessibility of your website, both manually and automatically. We have tools that integrate with our learning management system, Canvas, newly available to all of our academic partners across the university that can help say, is my course content accessible? So we provide lots of tools and resources available to you to help make sure you can deliver accessible content to any audience, whether they be faculty, staff, or students. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our training. So our team has 10 standard trainings that we offer on a regular basis, every 4 to 6 weeks for most of them, on things ranging from how to create accessible documents or slide decks, PDF documents, about our policies, testing your content for accessibility, or getting really technical for our developers on campus. Anything you can think of, we have a training for it, including Canvas that I just mentioned earlier for our academic audiences. We want to make it easy and seamless for you to author accessible, inclusive content. And our standing rule is that our team can train anyone on campus, and we will come to a custom session for you if you'll get at least 10 people together for us, right? As long as you can get a small quorum, you and a partner office that you want, we will come run a custom session of any of our trainings for you. It's free of charge to your department, making sure that you know how to make content accessible. It's one of the ways that we try to make it as easy as we can to live up to our policy, yes, but more than our policy, our commitment to make our university IT and our university content accessible to everybody, especially people with disabilities. One of the key tenets that we always say about our policy and our efforts is that everyone, no matter what we do at Harvard, has a role to play in making our digital presence more accessible. Whether you are a professor or a vice president or a coordinator for a department, there is something that you can do to make your part of Harvard more inclusive. And we try to make it more inclusive, yes, to share with the world so that they can consume all the awesome stuff that's produced, but because we also want the contributions of people with disabilities. Roughly 1 in 5 people in the world having some form of disability, we're missing out if we're not including and getting the contributions of those members as well. Everybody has a role to play, whether they be staff, faculty, or students with disabilities. And we would like to recognize some of our colleagues that have done a great job taking their role at Harvard and playing to the best of their ability, if you will, to share accessibility and promote accessibility. One of the groups we're going to talk about happens to be able to share it with the world, given what they do. So if you have not seen, we will share links and references after today. But our homepage in the past year has been featured, harvard.edu, about accessibility. And the team that created the website, the team from HPAC, Harvard Public Affairs and Communications, called it the accessible world. And the tagline said, an accessible world is a better world for everyone. And honestly, I could not agree more. We absolutely think that is true. And they did a great job of highlighting ways that a website can be made more accessible. And members of our team helped highlight ways a website can be made more accessible. But the wonderful thing that they did is they took authentic stories from members of the Harvard community and showed how their teaching and research and work was promoting accessibility and or being done by people with disabilities. So the accessible world was not projecting outward. It was authentically representing community members with disabilities at Harvard doing their work, sharing their research and teaching with the world. The accessible world includes those people with disabilities. So we want to give a shout out to members of the team that worked on the website. So bear with me while I have my list here. William Cannon, Ashley Simmons, Candace Kang, Molly Miles, Aaron Baker, and Melissa Laseka from our HPAC content strategy team. So I think at least some of them are here today. Is that correct? Somebody? So come on up, Melissa, on behalf of your team. And we have a small memento of our appreciation for the HPAC content strategy team and their great work. I know. I told her she had to come up and be prepared to see people, but not for why. So, you know, we wanted like a small element of surprise, but not total shock. So this says, for excellence in promoting digital accessibility at Harvard, the accessible world, to the HPAC content strategy team. Melissa's our director of that team. And then GAAD for May 18th, 2023. So well earned. Congratulations. I can't tell you how many people reached out and said, wow, it's so amazing that harvard.edu is featuring and promoting people with disabilities and accessibility work and the impact that it had on them in their corners of the world. So kudos to Melissa and to your team for all of the great work that you do. Next, to introduce our guest speaker, I'm going to introduce our new leader of our team in digital accessibility, who is the Chief Information Security and Data Privacy Officer at the university, Michael Tran Duff.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It sure is wonderful to see so many people join us today, both in person and online. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of this event today and this amazing team that you're hearing from. But let's talk about why we're here. The purpose of Global Accessibility Awareness Day is to get everyone thinking and talking and learning about digital access and inclusion. To reinvigorate each year our support for the more than 1 billion people worldwide with disabilities or impairments. Think about that. That's 1 in 8 individuals on the planet. It's far more common than most people realize. And as we heard from Alexis a little bit earlier, Harvard is strongly committed to accessibility, and we view accessibility as fundamental to Harvard's culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which is why we are honored today that to celebrate this day, we are joined in person here in Cambridge, right on this stage, by its co-founder, Jennison Asuncion. Jennison co-founded Global Accessibility Awareness Day in 2012. Since then, its celebrations have blossomed and expanded each year. And building on that momentum, a couple years ago on the 10th anniversary of this day, Jennison co-founded the GAAD Foundation with the mission to disrupt the culture of technology and digital product development to include accessibility as a core requirement. Accessibility as a core requirement. Jennison has been working in digital accessibility since way back in 2006, beginning with the Royal Bank of Canada's IT accessibility team. And then in 2013, he was recruited into Silicon Valley to join LinkedIn, where he serves as LinkedIn's head of accessibility engineering evangelism. In 2020, Business Insider named Jennison one of 30 power players helping new CEO Ryan Roslansky run LinkedIn. On the academic front, Jennison co-directs the AdaptTech Research Network based at Dawson College in Montreal, where he's been conducting and publishing research on technology used by Canadian post-secondary students with disabilities since back in 1997. So Jennison, I want to thank you for spending part of the day that you co-founded here with us, and Harvard welcomes you. I'm going to say a few words about Kyle here. You might, you want to go ahead and sit down together? Okay, why don't we do that? Okay, yeah. Now we heard from Kyle a bit earlier, but I want to give him a proper introduction as we get started with fireside chat here. So Kyle Shachmut is Harvard's Director of Digital Accessibility, providing strategic direction to digital accessibility efforts across the university. He led, as you heard earlier, the creation of our digital accessibility services team, and he collaborates with the university leadership to formulate university policy in digital accessibility. Prior to that, he focused on a universal design approach, integrating accessibility into at-scale learning experiences through Harvard X. Kyle does a lot outside of Harvard. So beyond Harvard, Kyle is the co-chair of the EDUCAUSE IT Accessibility Community Group, which is the largest affinity group for accessibility professionals in higher ed. In that capacity, he led a team that integrated accessibility into a security and privacy risk assessment tool called the HECVAT. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's used by hundreds of schools worldwide and by numerous vendors. In 2021, Kyle received EDUCAUSE's Rising Star Award. This is a big deal because this is an award that's bestowed on only one or two people a year across tens of thousands of technology professionals throughout higher ed. And on top of all that, Kyle speaks and writes about matters relating to digital accessibility, public policy, technology and education, and universal design. So we're very fortunate to have two distinguished experts and evangelists with us today. We're going to get started on this. Once Jennison and Kyle conclude their discussion, we're going to open the floor to questions. For those of you here in the room, just raise your hand and we'll get a microphone over to you so everyone can hear you online. And for those joining via Zoom, you can use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen, I think where you'll find it. For our Q&A today, in the back of the room, we've got two moderators that are going to help us out, Janelle Sims, Manager of Digital Accessibility, and Derek Jackson, Manager of Digital Accessibility Development. Without further ado, let's go to our panel. Over to you.
All right, thank you, Michael. Okay, Jennison, so thanks again for joining us here today in Cambridge. Global Accessibility Awareness Day, a lot going on around the globe as it relates to digital accessibility. Could you take us back? How did this start?
Sure. First of all, it's great to be here. This is my first in-person GAAD event that I've attended since you know what, and you know when. So it's just great to be here in the hallowed halls of Harvard for this. So I started my digital accessibility career back in 2006. And ever since I started, I was fascinated with finding different ways to make accessibility much more approachable for your everyday technology professional. Because I was dealing with a lot of folks, engineers, designers at the bank, many of whom had never had to deal with accessibility, frankly, before. And the usual, a lot of it is just talking to them, demonstrating, et cetera, et cetera. But I figured that there has to be a way to do this in different ways. And then I came upon this event in Washington, D.C. called Accessibility Camp DC at the MLK Public Library. And I flew to DC, and it was just this Saturday. They had no agenda. They just brought people together with the promise of pizza and discussions of all kinds on accessibility. The energy in the room was amazing. I said, I've got to do something like this back in Toronto. It took me a couple of years. 2011, I did that. And so I was already on that way. I'd helped with Accessibility Unconference here in Boston in 2010, and there was something in Seattle as well. So I was already on that road of just like getting people out there and just getting people to have fun and to learn about accessibility and to eat.
The power of pizza.
Right?
We use that a lot on college campuses.
Well, see?
So we're familiar.
Then it happened by chance that I was at home on this random Saturday evening in November of 2011 and doing what technology people do, just trolling Twitter and seeing what was going on. And I came upon this auto-generated tweet that said something to the effect of, accessibility needs to go mainstream now. I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I activated that link with my screen reader and came upon this blog post by someone I didn't know at the moment, Joe Devon, who was a back-end developer in Los Angeles. He was basically, he had a bee in his bonnet. So what do people do? They take to their blog. And he was talking all about how he was just frustrated that developers know nothing about accessibility. They don't even know what a screen reader is. And he was calling for a day, a global day, where people just learn about accessibility. And he just picked a date. He said, let's do it on May 9th. Let's do something. And I was like, this is a no-brainer. So I just replied to his blog post and said, great idea. This is what I'm up to. Like, if you're really serious about this, let's do something. And we got on the horn, and here we are 12 years later, celebrating our 12th year. It's Joe and I never thought it was ever going to turn out to be something that it has become. At a certain point, we built the platform and we just let people, whether it's at Harvard or at HSBC in Hong Kong, or a small little NGO tucked away somewhere, they want to talk about digital access and inclusion and do it on or around the date, the third Thursday of May. And it's made it. I wasn't even sure during COVID what was going to happen. But even in 2020, I think virtual events that were at least at that point, I think there were 200 then. We were consistent around 200. We know that there's a lot more that happens that we don't know about until after the fact. And what's really exciting to me is the number of events that are happening in different languages, because G is global. And so having sessions in Cantonese, in Arabic, and all kinds of other languages, spreading the word is amazing.
That's really exciting, and it's so cool how expansively it's grown, right? The power of one small gathering over pizza to all around the world in a lot of different languages. Do you have any memories of what it was like the first year you celebrated Global Accessibility Awareness Day?
Honestly, so the first year I launched a meetup group in Toronto called Toronto Accessibility Inclusive Design, and it's still in existence today, ALNYTO. And it was such a long day that I was nodding off at the kickoff of the meetup, and people were having to tap me on the shoulder to keep me awake. But because we were having events and I was just like tuning in to things happening in Australia, which is of course the day before, and all kinds of things. So I think that, now not much has changed in terms of running on fumes. Basically, I flew in from the Bay Area last night, but I was following events as they were unfolding in APEC while I was flying over here and into this morning. I think I gave Kyle a little bit of a a heart palpitation when I told him I was running late because I got a little distracted with some things. One of the things we did this morning is we dropped a wrap for GAAD.
I wanted to ask you about this.
Yeah. So we can talk about that after. But yeah, but it's just the energy of it is what keeps me going. I know that's the same thing for Joe as well.
Lots of demands on your time. And we're thrilled you're here today. We're totally on time. Tell us a little more about what dropped today and the music.
Yeah. So again, this was under the whole group, the whole concept of, finding different ways to reach people. Because the danger, of course, when we talk about accessibility is we end up preaching to the choir. And really the purpose of GAAD is to reach the everyday person. So, what better way to reach folks than something fun? We have someone at LinkedIn who by day is an exceptional engineer, but he also likes to rap. His name is Adam Wolkoff. And so I knew him and I approached him a couple of months ago and said, hey, Global Accessibility Awareness Day is coming up. Would you consider putting together a rap for this? And he and Coop is his partner. They wrote up the rap, which of course they shared and we worked together on. And so it dropped this morning. We'll make sure to get it out to folks. Or you could, I guess at this point, you could use your favorite search engine and type GAAD, G-A-A-D rap. And I think it should come up. It's on YouTube.
We'll share it with folks.
And we'll share it. Yeah,
that's great.
We'll get it out there. But again, there's the full messages in there about different, like how accessibility is important, all that kind of good stuff. But it's just done in a non-threatening way. Then just have fun.
We'll have a new soundtrack for our trainings.
Yeah, do it. Use it.
Absolutely, right? We'll have some mood music when the Zoom starts, and it's gotta have all the different genres represented in it. It's really cool. So it started as you nodding off in a meeting 12 years ago, right? It's grown into this huge worldwide phenomenon. You see a lot of companies will make accessibility related product announcements or time kind of some of their release cycles around celebrating this day. Academic institutions, right, here at Harvard, celebrating what we do. There's a lot. Where do you want this to be in 5 years or 10 years? Can you imagine how this is going to keep growing? It's great.
Where I'd like to see it grow is, as I mentioned before, is the G in the global piece. I'd love to see as many and we have again over 200 events this year that we know of. Most of them are in English. I'd like to have us have many more sessions in languages other than English, talking about digital accessibility. I know you're probably going to ask me about this after, but through the foundation, we're going to get, more stuff happening on a more, throughout the year. But for GAAD itself, I see that area as growing, that outside of the English realm. And then just other things like gaming has been such a huge push during GAAD. All the gaming studios, which to me is amazing. Because as important as it is, and we can talk here forever about making places like Harvard, large corporations, making all of those things accessible, gaming is about having fun.
We want the fun stuff too.
And when you think about people with certain disabilities or impairments who cannot leave the house, gaming has become a way to be connected. And what's really neat about gaming is people can choose not to necessarily disclose that they have a disability or impairment. So long as that game is made to be accessible, they are playing on an equal playing field. And I've seen this over the last few years, that gaming studios have really upped their game, particularly around the day of GAAD, to make announcements and things like that.
It's really cool. A widening reach, and right, we want all areas of society, right? We're very invested in education and what we do for education and career readiness, but yeah, the fun stuff should be accessible too. You mentioned a little bit, and Michael did in your intro, but how did you get started in doing accessibility? Was this what you wanted to do from the time you were 5, or how did you get your start in accessibility?
So I think when I became interested was I attended back in Canada, I attended a summer program where they brought together 24 blind and visually impaired youth to learn about basically different technologies that could help us. Now, I fortunately had access, living in a big city, had access to a screen reader and even a braille display when I was in high school and things like that. But witnessing other students coming from smaller towns, some of them who have never had an opportunity to use screen enlargement software or to use a screen reader, that had a profound impact on me. And I knew then that I was interested in something to do with technology and empowering people with disabilities. Now, I thought, well, the way to get there was to become a computer scientist. And unfortunately, that wasn't going to be the route that was going to be most successful for me. So I was like, okay, well, I got to figure things out. And so, I was doing research in accessibility, as was mentioned in the introduction, in grad school. But then I went off and did some other stuff professionally. But I was still keeping my toe in accessibility. And obviously, it was important to me because I'm an end user consumer and benefactor of it. But in 2006, I quit my job. At the time, I was a project manager doing e-learning implementations. I quit my job without a parachute, just so I could figure out what I wanted to do next. And my friends were like, well, why do you keep resisting doing the accessibility thing? And so I said, well, okay, let me give it a try. Now, my thing was, though, I had no background. I wasn't an engineer, and I certainly had no QA experience. So I was going to interviews back in Toronto, and they were asking me about, talk to us about how you use these different QA processes. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to waste your time. I have none of this experience. So those interviews didn't last that long. Now, fortunately, as my life typically is, things just happen. And my resume ended up on the desk of the manager of the IT accessibility team at Canada's largest bank, that being RBC. And what was supposed to be a half-hour interview turned out to be a 3-hour conversation, in which I like to mention that I missed a haircut appointment for. But that ended up becoming a 6.5-year job where I basically learned everything. I became much more technically savvy. I became very comfortable talking to web and mobile developers, learning the lingo of designers. I helped build RBC's procurement program and all of those things. So that's basically how I got started.
That's really awesome. I always give a short quip when people ask. I just got into this out of self-interest, and then it turned into a career. How have things changed from then to now, right? So that was 10, 15 years ago. Technology evolves, the ways we're implementing accessibility evolved. What's different about doing it in 2023?
I think for me personally, what I've seen different is there seems to be a lot more enthusiasm and interest. And of course, I'm going to be subjective working at a company like LinkedIn, where our mission, we're driven by creating economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. And so people who come to work there obviously believe in that. And so the engineers and designers that I'm working with understand that by making their stuff accessible, we're moving the needle. Everyone understands the unemployment rate of people with disabilities and how atrocious that is. And so what I've noticed in just the time I've been at LinkedIn, and it's going to be my 10-year anniversary this November, is just the passion that the engineers are bringing to it. Not that necessarily there wasn't the same passion at the bank, but that's different, right? It's like we're trying to get people to buy our products in a bank. Here, we just want to help people find a job. and to grow their career. And so I've just that in itself is something that I've noticed that's different. Now on the technology front, certainly, test automation, AI, all those buzzwords, it's all great. It's certainly made my job a lot easier because I can at least point to, we're in the process of implementing test automation throughout, into our testing pipelines and all of that kind of stuff. But it really is about the excitement that engineers and designers, engineers in particular, because I sit within engineering, they understand, first of all, that developing accessibly is part of their craft as an engineer. Because who wants to ship code that has bugs in it? I mean, that's essentially what you're doing if you're not developing accessibly. You're shipping buggy code, and you're basically building up tech debt that someone else is going to have to clean up later. So by framing it that way, by getting engineers to understand that this is part of their craft, that gets them excited. It's building that culture, which is so important. So I can just go on and on, but that's
for 3 hours, right?
But that seems to be like the big thing. And again, like I said, can't ignore all the technology that has changed, that has made our jobs. I think you'd agree with me too, Kyle. It's just made our jobs and the conversations we have a lot easier because we can point to tools that will help. That won't replace the manual testing that unfortunately still has to be done. But we're hopeful with AI and computer vision and maybe some smart folks here at Harvard, computer scientists who can help us bridge that gap and create some of the tooling that will make things, again, that much easier for more engineers to develop accessibly.
Absolutely. I would agree. Night and day, even from 5 years ago and certainly 10 years ago in the conversations we have with people and how when we can talk about accessibility and the ways that accessibility is implemented on devices they use every day, whether it be for work or for fun, right? It makes accessibility more real in a way that 15 or 20 years ago, it might have been some abstract or really piece of technology that you've never seen or heard of. And when it's something that's in your pocket or something that's connected to your TV at home, and those things involve accessibility as well, I think it makes it more real to someone that might not be an expert, for sure. When you're talking with these engineers, whether it be LinkedIn or through the GAAD Foundation about accessibility, how do you describe the awesomeness that is accessibility to someone that doesn't know, right? You might be preaching to some of the choir here and folks who work on accessibility, like you mentioned, but when you're talking to someone for the first time, like why accessibility? What's your pitch?
I think rather than speaking, I think the power is in the demonstrating. And every time, whether it's at LinkedIn, when I first came to LinkedIn all those years ago and did a demo to them, or any number of demos that I've done over the years at other technology companies, we could talk all we want about the guidelines and standards and how important it is and all of that stuff. But when an engineer or designer actually sees their product or their site or their app being used and showing the good and the stuff that might need some love, when they see that, that's the lights on moment where they go and get it. And that will always be to me what sells it. I don't have to say anything else, usually, except just to show it. And you can find so many examples online and things like that. Now, I want to be clear, it has nothing at all whatsoever to do with shaming. It just has to do with just because people in the main, first of all, most people have never interacted with a person with a disability before. And the idea of people with disabilities using what they've built, for some people is just something that they haven't thought of. And that's, it is what it is. But when they get a chance to actually see it in action, that's when the magic happens. And sure, there'll be some situations where the conversations can get a little spicy. you know, and timelines, trade-offs, excessive. There's always going to be trade-offs, and I'm not someone who is looking for perfection. You know, it's about over time, and let's see what we can get done now, and let's put a plan in place for the near term and longer term. As a recovering project manager, I get it. I totally understand. As long as you're willing to walk along on the journey and understand that this stuff are things that need to get done, then things will work out. Otherwise, you know, that's other conversations that have to happen. But 9 times out of 10, like I said, the demonstration over the speaking to me is the first place I would go.
Sure. I find it interesting, and I find it at Harvard and everywhere else I've worked, where so often it'll be the case too, that the people that, as you said, champion accessibility first and foremost are people that know or have worked with someone with a disability, either because they had a teammate or because they have a child or a coworker or a cousin that has some sort of accessibility need, and they kind of
or they frankly
internalize it, right?
Or they frankly may have a non-visible disability or impairment themselves. 80% of folks with disabilities or impairments around the world have disabilities or impairments that are unseen or non-visible. So it's you know, it's all kinds of folks who are the initial champions. But I have to say, I have had situations where the conversations started differently in the beginning, and those folks have become the most ardent champions once they understand.
Absolutely. And I certainly find a lot of people, they want to understand or don't want to intentionally exclude folks once they learn that they may have been, right? So we'll switch here and ask some questions of the audience here in just a minute. You mentioned your project manager background and working with engineers, and everybody probably has a backlog, you know, that will go from here to Silicon Valley, stretching with what they can do. So when someone's facing a real uphill battle or a lot that they need to tackle when it comes to accessibility, how do you help people frame the big picture and tackle the right thing first? Right.
Well, and I mentioned this before, but it's good to mention here again. Always the danger is once you open this up, people are like, oh, well, we have to get this all done, and it's this whole boil the ocean syndrome that ends up happening. And part of it is just really like laser focus on what are the most impactful things that can be done right away. And it might only be 1 or 2 things, and you have to be all right with that. It can't be everything. And so, you know, that's why everyone always says, you know, you can't make everything a blocking ticket, right? Otherwise, there's nothing else. So you have to make those tough choices and prioritize what's really a blocker, what's a critical, and work your way through it. I'm talking about backlogs here. But even when you're just talking about like plans, you know, everyone wants to create the most inclusive environment everywhere. And I get that. But doing it in realistic chunks is really where it's going to work. Otherwise, you're always going to be off by a step. You're not going to hit your milestones. So again, like I said, I talk to people about, let's see, like, okay, I know you want to get these 10 things done. You're only going to get 4 done this year. What are those? And then let's work our way that way. Now, obviously, sometimes circumstances can't always dictate that you can only do certain things. But again, like you really need to look like, what is the end goal? And here's the reality. Accessibility there'll always be trade-offs. It's never going to be the most important thing to everyone.
Sense. Last question before we pull in Janelle and Derek to moderate our Q&A. So you've talked to the engineers, you've got them on board, they're into accessibility. How do you keep up with evolving technology? What's the latest thing? where to learn stuff, of course, beyond like LinkedIn and Harvard's awesome accessibility resources, but beyond those, how do you stay up to date with what to know in accessibility?
I attend conferences like a lot of other folks, all over the social media, checking all of those things out. Accessibility is not unlike other technology things that people kind of gravitate to: podcasts, tech publications, influencers, things like that. So I would say I follow accessibility trends the same way anyone in this room would follow their own tech trends, podcasts, people I respect, conferences, all of those different avenues.
Great. Well, thank you for being here and sharing that. We'd love to open it up to our audience. So Janelle and Derek, I think you've got some questions for us queued up from the group.
Are there any questions?
And maybe while we're waiting for that, if I could just plug the website accessibility.day for those who want to learn more, including seeing the blog post that Joe wrote. The foundation, you can go to GAAD.foundation. We just announced this morning or last night, our nominations are now open for something that we're calling the GAADs. These are awards that we are going to be giving out in November. The first awards we'll be giving out in San Francisco, and they're for projects that have basically are living and breathing the mission and vision of the foundation, which is essentially to disrupt the culture of digital product development to make accessibility a core requirement. So check that out. Who knows, there might be a particular project here at Harvard that might be interesting to submit. So I'll leave that with you folks.
Awesome.
So I think we had a question in the middle. Is that right?
Hi, Jennison.
Hey.
Michael Elgo. I'm an accessibility product manager with ServiceNow. And I just wanted to ask a question. Actually, you just answered a question about the GAADs, which was fantastic. You just dropped that about yesterday. But as a product manager, I know you said the accessibility is always a trade-off, and that's something I've experienced in the company. And I want to know, how do you work out, and what was your process in working out negotiations, I guess,
Right.
with the teams and making sure that is a priority.
Right, and as I mentioned there, myself, yeah, it is tough, right? And part of it is like finding, say you have a backlog and just figuring out, okay, you have like 30 blockers. Like, what is the work effort here to get these all done? And then you start pairing it back. Like, let's get these 10 done now. Let's get them scheduled in the upcoming sprints. And while we're at it, let's start making accessibility part of the definition of done. And so that accessibility isn't something that's surprising people. For most people, it is a surprise at the beginning in a project, but as you start building that muscle and getting people to think about it throughout the project lifecycle, then as they get to their next project, they'll be saying like, oh, like we need to start budgeting for accessibility and thinking about it more. So yeah, part of it is just, like I said, first of all, like assuming that someone is just dealing with accessibility, as it sometimes is the case, like really close to launch, right? Really leaning in on like, okay, what are those big blocking items? Let's get those all buttoned down first. Sure, we've got all these other things. Let's get those other pieces scheduled, and then let's start looking long term at how do we build this muscle? How do we start integrating accessibility more from project kickoff?
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
And I don't know, Janelle, it looks like there might be some questions online.
Yeah, there's been some great questions about digital accessibility services and our resources. So we've been answering those in the chat, but we did get one from someone who's really happy to join us virtually on this special day. For Jennison and Kyle, you mentioned how you follow tech trends through social media. Do you have any podcast or blog post recommendations for us?
Kyle?
I feel like I'm knee deep in reading academic articles these days. A little less exciting to share on social media, depending on your research interests, you know. Like Jennison, I love reading and contributing to and talking to like trade specific publications. So what are like the different education resources about accessibility? I'm shameless plug that Michael mentioned earlier, the EDUCAUSE community group. It's a group of practitioners, maybe not what you might formally consider a social network, but a very social network that shares tips and resources related to accessibility in technology all the time. That's certainly where I get a ton of crowdsourced accessibility knowledge and things that are very specific to the work that we do in higher education. So that's certainly one of the greatest resources I'm really privileged to be plugged into, is just a community of people that do this work, sharing resources and tips and tricks. That's one of the things I love most about accessibility is even sometimes working in a space where you might have a competitor in the corporate world or a peer institution, like nobody really hides accessibility knowledge or expertise, right? It's people are so sharing and open with how they get their work done and make improvements related to accessibility. But how about you?
Yeah, I want to give a shout out to David Kennedy, who puts out a weekly e-newsletter called A11Y Weekly, A11Y Weekly, which is packed full of amazing stuff. And just honestly, like following the A11Y hashtag on your social media platform of choice. Of course, I'm going to say also following the accessibility hashtag on LinkedIn there's a lot of good professional stuff that's shared through there. I know there's also an A11Y Slack channel that a lot of people like to follow. So yeah, those are some other really neat places to keep up to date.
And that's online. We should also mention, right? There are accessibility groups that meet up all around the world.
Oh yeah.
And so there's no substitution, like Jennison said, conferences, but even
there's one here in Boston.
Meetups. I was just going to say, the Boston Accessibility Group, they've got a meeting tonight that they're hosting all about accessibility, Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And so, you know, yes, social media and online is a great way, but many of those have also in-person analogous communities. And then you get the benefit of great expertise and cool people that you get to meet.
No, absolutely. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Bay Area Accessibility and Inclusive Design, which I co-lead. But if you use your favorite search engine, type the word meetup and accessibility, you'll probably find, for folks virtually, you'll find potentially a meetup group in your city. And if you don't have one, start one.
Our Boston leaders are Derek on the stage and Eric, who's in the back, members of our team. Other questions?
Hi, this is Bob Dolan with Diverse Learners Consulting and also Harvard Business School. On the eve of WCAG 2.2 coming out, finally, I'm just curious what are some of the WCAG 3 efforts that you've each found most exciting and are most looking forward to?
Well, I will say, and the W3C will also say that 3.0 is years away. I think for myself, I am looking forward to 2.2 becoming finalized and published. And the latest word is that will be coming out in the July to September timeframe. And I think what's neat about 2.2 is that a lot of it is just putting into is codifying what was already in 2.1 that was unspoken. And so, you know, I think what people will find that they're going to like about 2.2 are kind of like the missing pieces where people were like in 2.1, oh, you know, like why didn't they mention this or that? And so I think it's going to be worth the wait for 2.2. So look forward to that. 3.0, there's a lot that's moving. There's a lot of moving parts. So I'm going to defer making any comment. This is my, did I tell you I did a bachelor's in political science? So I'm going to defer there because I know that they are, you know, there's definitely a framework and there's things happening with 3.0, but I think I'd like to give them some more time to, first of all, I'd like to see 2.2 out the door before looking too far ahead to 3.0. Kyle, did you have anything?
I followed some of them. I think, like Jennison said, they're years away. If we're being really honest, in partnering with a lot of vendor partners that we have, I'd love to see people working on 2.1 and not 2.0, right? And we always like to point out when someone's like, we're trying to meet WCAG 2.0, that that's a standard from 2008 that doesn't acknowledge the existence of mobile devices. So like, can we aim a little higher when we're working on accessibility? So the standards are really important, right? Because they're the technical nuts and bolts that we follow. But you know, I think we're going to get there with 2.2 coming out soon. But there's a lot of work still to be done on training people to meet the requirements that we have today as well.
Thank you.
Janelle's got another question from the online audience.
Yes. First of all, one comment just as a follow-up to Kyle's mentioning EDUCAUSE IT Access. This person just wanted to say it's a superb group, and Kyle modestly neglects to mention that he co-chairs the group to excellent effect. His leadership is a big part of the group's value. So nice shout out to
Well,
Kyle.
thank you.
And then we have another question that's been upvoted a couple of times. It's quote, the obligatory question about AI. Do you view it as a mostly positive thing in terms of the future of digital accessibility? How do you think about it in terms of navigating people's biases, for example, racism or sexism remaining a problem with AI due to the society we live in?
I think what's most exciting about AI right now is we are in a position to influence it and to influence the change. It's nothing's set in stone right this second. You know, if anyone's following, the people are also cautioning about AI and people going a little out of control with developing this and that right this second. So we're still in this stage where all of us who care about, you know, it was mentioning about bias and potential exclusion of people with disabilities. Now's our time to speak up and to get involved. So I think this is the perfect time. Am I excited about it? I'm interested. I wouldn't say like you know, my co-founding partner and brother in arms in Global Accessibility Awareness Day, Joe Devon, shout out to him. You know, you couldn't get someone more excited than him around AI and the possibilities. I'm more kind of cautiously watching on the sidelines and reading up and learning more. But yeah, there's definitely, you know, like I mentioned before, test automation. The fact that test automation now can only pick up a certain number of accessibility types of violations, and that there's still so much manual accessibility testing that's required. You know, certainly AI will be able to help us out there. We just need to be thoughtful about the way we go about it. We absolutely need to make sure from the modeling perspective that we do include folks with disabilities and impairments as part of those models. I keep hearing these stories about, you know, these interviews that are now being done by like these virtual, like nobodies, right? Your first interview is going to be with this thing. And, you know, that's gonna apparently, like, the danger is like if you're not making eye contact, it'll ding you on that. Well, I'd be in trouble, right? Because you'd have to, it's for tough for someone like myself, completely blind and such, to be making perfect eye contact. So what's going to happen if I'm dealing with this virtual interviewer? So yeah, there's definitely questions that need to be answered, but I don't think we're far enough down the road that we're in trouble. So if you care about the issues, now's the time for all of us to be speaking up and getting involved and finding out, like, and asking that question everywhere and always. Well, what about accessibility? What are you doing there? Or are you including people with disabilities in your models?
Yeah, I was gonna say the mantra, right, for
Yeah.
the disability rights movement forever, nothing about us without it,
Yep.
or just nothing without us.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what Jennison's talking about with AI, right? Making sure that those of us who have disabilities or allies of those that have disabilities are a part of that conversation, including those doing research in these areas. I'm sure everybody's played with the different like chat GPTs out there, right? The AI du jour, but it reflects back to us what we have in the world. And sometimes that's great and inspiring. And sometimes if you ask it to describe a person with a disability, you can get all of the same tropes or negative perceptions that society has of people with disabilities today, right now. And so it's up to us to stay involved in that conversation early and often to keep things moving in a positive direction, because there's so much potential for what we can do, but we don't want all of that potential to be unleashed in harmful ways or ways that exclude or ways that don't include the perspectives of people with disabilities.
Do we have any more? Oh, we have a question, another question in the audience here. Way in the back.
Hi, everyone. My name is Corina Mard. I'm learning to become a front-end developer. For me, being able to build like accessible sites is personal. I used to be a high school math teacher, so I'm thinking about my student who was colorblind, or my student who relied on a screen reader to access the web. But unfortunately, I find that it's been much easier to advance my, let's say, JavaScript skills or HTML, CSS, than it's been to advance my knowledge of how to build accessible websites. You might know that, web developers have great communities, so it's easy to find somebody to give feedback on the code I wrote for a page or a website. But they would be looking for, pixel perfect design or maybe responsive design. And often if I would ask, okay, how about accessibility? They would say, what do you mean? Like, what am I supposed to look for? So what I would personally find really useful as a, entry-level aspiring developer is, opportunities for mentorship from, people who are already established in the, accessibility community. And I was wondering if you know any resources or any ways to have access to that kind of mentorship. Thank you.
Sure. No, that's an important aspect of it. There's a couple of things I'll say on this. Like from you're saying about it, like learning. Fortunately, there's a lot of good material online now that like different companies. I won't name any here, but there are some good companies out there that put free and sometimes paid courses online around like fundamentals of accessibility from a technical perspective. There's also now it's not so new anymore, but there's an opportunity to become certified as an accessibility professional, and separately or as part of that as a web accessibility specialist, which will really hone your skills in that. And that's put through an organization called the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. But outside of that, certainly, what's really neat about the accessibility community is, and I've heard anecdotally, and I know this to be true myself, is that many of us are very approachable through social media and such, and so people can reach out and see if someone has time to be a mentor. That's something I certainly enjoy doing. But there's definitely a lot of folks out there who would be willing to do that kind of thing as well. So part of it is just finding, engineers who are working on it, like whether you look on anywhere, like it's interesting, Stack Overflow, or even apparently there's some active Reddit threads on accessibility, but just finding someone who you think, you agree with their position, or you like the way that they write, or things like that, and they seem to know their thing around accessibility. Just approach them and see, if they'd be willing to meet or to mentor you in accessibility. I think is a good way to go. I don't know, Kyle, if you have any other ideas.
Yeah, and then so online, great, and then like we mentioned earlier, local meetups or conferences are great places to meet mentors. Many mentors that I've had over the years, I've met at like a Boston accessibility meetup, or at a, Accessing Higher Ground conference or something like that, where it's people interested that are already interested in what you're doing, and they go to those kind of things to meet people and to share ideas. And so those are great places to meet in a friendly environment that's open and welcoming to people. You don't have to be an expert to go. They're really excited to see new people at any of those kind of things. Great question, though. Thanks for asking.
I think we've got some more online questions.
Yeah, we have one. Actually, it came in from William Cannon, who is one of the recipients of the Harvard Accessibility in the World Award we gave earlier. So William asks that sometimes examples are a helpful way to explore best practices. Are there high traffic websites you think are doing a great job with accessibility?
Ah,
Yes, Jennison. I think Harvard.edu does a great job with accessibility, William. So kudos to you for that. I think it really varies a lot, right? People ask me a lot about like news websites or other things, which are a pain for a whole bunch of reasons, right? So only some of which are related to accessibility. But like I'll often read things via like RSS on the web or something, and that's probably how very few people might be experiencing a website. So, and I don't know if I have a high traffic website. Great example to point to. I always love when people ask of examples. One that I always use to plug some colleagues on the internet, and what they do is the Accessible University website that we use when we train folks, because it mocks up some examples of things that we all have all the time on university websites, and then shows an accessible version and an inaccessible version, and then gives you a demo and a key to how things are different in one versus the other, and gives you an opportunity to really pick it apart. I know I've trained before where I'll be showing an issue like on, I don't know, NewYorkTimes.com or whatever it might be, and then the next month I'm running a training and like they fixed it. And I mean, great, right? Like let's fix all the accessibility issues, but then the issue I was trying to demonstrate wasn't available. So those tend to be the areas I like to send people to find static examples of things, since there's often a really dynamic environment. How about you?
the folks at the W3C have a site called the Before and After Demonstration, where they show, as it sounds, the before and after, what happens once you do implement the web content accessibility guidelines as a way of finding examples. I think that that's a really neat one, because it is exactly that. So if you use your favorite search engine and plug in W3C before and after demonstration, and then the word accessibility, I'm 99% sure that will pop up.
And mine was a similar one. It was from University of Washington, and then there's another similar one from Duke that have done similar work. You have time for one or two more? Or?
Yeah. Any other questions? Or actually, I do. Oh, here we go. We got another question front.
Bob Dolan again. Just to add on another great example, I want to point out my colleagues at the University of Colorado at Boulder on the PHET team, P-H-E-T,
Yeah, it's a great.
have been doing some fabulous simulations for a number of years, mostly geared toward primary and secondary education, focusing on science and math. They've got some great examples of complex interactive simulations, and they've been doing a phenomenal job with interactivity and accessibility.
One of the things I'll mention, one of the challenges and one of the neat things of living and breathing, like I'm working in the Silicon Valley now. Like when I was in banking, a project would take months and months and months to release. Whereas in the Silicon Valley, whether it's LinkedIn or anywhere else, you're continuously releasing code. So on the good side, you know, there's opportunities to always iterate on accessibility. On the not so good side, sometimes you end up breaking things that were once accessible, and now when you introduce something new, you know, it makes that experience inaccessible. But there's that push and pull. You know, we are so far away from those sites that are going to stay stable for any length of time anymore. Everyone always wants to come up with a new version or a new release or a new tweak or something there here and there, or there's a new feature that's being added every month or whatnot. And that's always the challenge of today, or one of the challenges of today, particularly with the high traffic sites, because they want you to keep coming back. So they reason the way that they do that in part is by introducing new things to give and to entice people to come back for more.
We have any final questions?
I'll wrap us up by just saying, first of all, after we wrap, we will have members of our team available to those in person. If you want to chat about accessibility or learn about some of the services that we offer at Digital Accessibility Services, our team will be available around the stage or out in the hall, and we'll be happy to talk to you or set up another time to chat. You can always contact us, digitalaccessibility@harvard.edu. And then we want to thank you. Thank you for coming virtually. Thank you for coming in person. Thank you to our moderators. Thanks to Alexis, who had to leave, to Michael, to Janelle, to Derek for moderating. And especially thank you to Jennison for joining us today on Global Accessibility Awareness Day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming.